I kept playing on the bass guitar. I'd go boom, 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 and I just kept playing it over and over again. And I would say, let's record this. And he'd go, what for? I go, because I'm going to play the drums. I'm going to show you how I hear this song.
Yeah.
And so I played it so many times. He says, if you play that one more time, I'm going to smash this guitar over your head. And I go, well, why did you write some guitar parts around the song? And that turned out to be Turn Me Loose, which was a very
Yeah.
big song for us. And that's how that song got started. One of the things is when I was recording another one of our big songs, it was written differently than it turned out to be. And
Mm-hmm.
recording it, I just was basically totally into it. And I've got my eyes closed and I'm singing. And I went, everybody's working for the weekend. And they kind of stopped the tape and they went, hold it, it's supposed to be everybody's waiting for the weekend. And I went, no way, no way. It's got to be
Ah.
working for the weekend. And that's
Yeah.
how it changed. And that changed right on the spot. It was like, I
Yep.
never planned it that way. And that was very exciting because Paul came out and he went, that is so much better, man.
Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm Sarah Ramsey, and this show aims to pull back the curtain on the entertainment industry, where veterans give up-and-coming artists some of the information they wish they'd had when they were just starting out. Sort of a music industry primer, if you will. Welcome to the Vocal Lab. Today, I am thrilled to have my guest, Mike Reno, who is the lead singer of the rock band Loverboy. And Loverboy released their first album in 1980, and the band went on to tour extensively and release several more multi-platinum albums. Reno and Loverboy have sold over 30 million albums, including soundtracks for blockbuster movies Top Gun, Charlie's Angels, Footloose, Iron Eagle 11, and Dream a Little Dream, to name but a few. Inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame in 2009, Reno and Loverboy show no signs of slowing down. They continue to tour extensively every year. Thank you for joining me today, Mike.
Oh, Sarah, I'm glad to join you. It's nice to haven't seen you in a while.
I know it's been quite a while. Well, that pesky pandemic really threw a wrench in our our socializing.
You know what's funny about the COVID pandemic is for 45 years, just with this band alone, Loverboy,
Yeah.
I'm always going somewhere. And
Yeah.
during the pandemic, I actually got to stay home for like a year and a half. And I just went, oh, this is what it's like to stay home and hang out with all your stuff.
This is how the other half lives.
Right? So I hate to say it, but I kind of enjoyed the pandemic.
I'm right there with you. I actually, I didn't love what was happening health-wise to the world and all of that, but in my own little bubble of my home, I loved it, actually.
Yeah.
I loved the time with my family and the slower, I loved it.
So, yeah, tightened everything up.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you want to tell us your story briefly for listeners who maybe are just meeting you for the first time today, and a bit about who you are and your journey in the biz and how you got where you are today?
Well, just like Ted Baxter, it all started in a 100-watt radio station back in the Okanagan Valley. It's the fruit district of the British Columbia, of course. I grew up in British Columbia, Canada, in a small town about 4 hours east of Vancouver. A beautiful little town of 16,000 people. Nice place to grow up. And at an early age, I was at a paper route. I saved enough money to buy a set of drums. I really wanted to be in a band. And my brother was a guitar player. He's older than me. So he says, get a set of drums. We can play together. I'll teach you how to sing backup harmonies. He'll be the lead singer. Of course, he's the older brother. He played guitar and sang, and I was the drummer. And I even got a chance to play at a bunch of the concerts that were put on. And my dad would even carry a trailer, and he'd pull a trailer behind the big Oldsmobile, and all of the guys would be in the car, and all the equipment would be in the U-Haul. And it was just a great way to grow up. And I just started music when I was 11. So it was like something I've always done. And, there was a process. And then I had a few bands that were pretty successful in the little area that I grew up in. But
Hmm.
the one band we were getting serious with, and the guys came to me one day and said, "Hey, Mike, would you consider standing up front and just singing for this band?" I go, "What are you talking about, right?" Because when you're a drummer and a singer, you got all the drums in front of you and you got some protection, you know.
Yeah.
But they asked me to be a singer, and I said, "I don't know about that." And then they said, "Well, Led Zeppelin got a singer, Deep Purple got a singer, Rolling Stones got a singer. Everybody's got a singer, you know." And
Yeah.
so they talked me into it, and I didn't want to do it, but once I'd done a few concerts, I said, "Well, this is kind of cool because you get to kind of control the evening a little bit.
Yeah.
And you get to move around and you get to relate to the people, which was kind of important to me. So it started off as a drummer, and then I ended up as a singer. So, and a lot of people apparently I've heard along the way that started that way. Yeah, I think Mick Jagger, I think Steve Tyler, just to name a few,
Yeah.
all kind of had the drummer start, and then they became singers. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where it all started for me, and that was kind of while I was growing up and still going to school.
Hmm.
And then the big move came when I finished school and everybody went to university, and I decided I wanted to start a different band and move to Calgary, Alberta.
Hmm.
That's back then. There was a stage with I don't know, but 1,000 seats in every bar in Alberta. They're big drinkers out there,
Yeah.
and so we'd
Yeah.
play bars all week, every
Hmm.
week, and we always had work, and it was great. It was a great way, to get going. And we played every night. We traveled around in an old school bus that was kind of fixed up a little bit,
Hmm.
for the equipment in the back and us in the front. And that's really how it all started for me. I've always been into music. It's right from the start.
Yeah.
Still there.
And indeed you are. Here on the Vocal Lab, we aim to shine a light into the industry through the lens of what I know now that I wish I'd known then. So, with that in mind, if you were starting all over again, is there anything you would do differently?
Interesting. The funny thing about starting out in the first place is there's all this unknown stuff,
Yeah.
which makes you kind of experiment, and it makes you go places you may be a little nervous about going. But
Mm-hmm.
and so that part of it would have to be the same, because you have to try things, and that's the only thing that gives you any experience, really.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like back in the day when I kind of grew up, you were only cool if you smoked cigarettes, right? Who smokes now? Nobody. And I
Yeah.
quit years ago, and
Yeah.
it was just one of those things. If I had to start all over again, I probably never would have smoked.
Yep.
And I remember Paul Dean, our guitar player, that used to say, "What does Mike do to warm up for a concert?" And he says, and Paul goes, "As far as I know, I think he has a cigarette and a couple of beers." And that's when you were 20 or your mid 20s, right? And as you grow a little older, you get a little smarter.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the beginning, I don't know if I would change anything. It was an
Mm-hmm.
experience that I relish. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I was nervous about it. Every change I made was was a test to see if I could handle it. And it's just, I don't know. It was a wonderful experience growing up
Yeah.
because it was all about music, and we used to play music. I often tell people, say, "How do you keep your voice good?" And I said, the one thing I tell them nowadays, I says, try not to sing like somebody else.
Yes.
Because when you put on the voice, you're not using your own voice properly.
Mm-hmm.
And because I remember when we used to sing other songs, from other bands before we
Mm-hmm.
started writing songs. I'd get a bit of a sore throat, and I'd realize it was probably from singing, like trying to sing like the guy that
Yep.
I'm singing. So that's something I definitely would change it. Even if I was singing somebody else's song, I would sing it like me if I had to
Yeah.
start over again, because when you sing like yourself, your voice tends to last a lot longer.
Amen.
Yeah.
I once more for the people in the back. It's the truth. Yeah. Uh, I think that when younger singers are coming up, there can often be a stage where you are going through a lot of imitation as you're trying to find your own sound. But when people are working with cover music, I tell my students a lot, the only time you really, really need to sound like somebody else is if you are being paid a lot of money to play in a tribute band to sound like that somebody else. But
Right.
other than that, you can try it on for a minute to see if it's a thing that you like, but it's that person has already done that. You don't need to do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ex- Another thing I noticed, and this is just in the last two tours, we've been lucky enough to keep getting these tours. Live Nation
Mhm.
seems to love us, so that's great.
Yeah.
Um, and I was to I was playing night after night in these giant amphitheaters in the U.S. Uh, the last two summers.
Mhm.
One, the first time it was with the Styx and REO Speedwagon, and
Mhm.
then last year it was with Foreigner,
Yeah.
and and this year it's with Sammy Hagar. So we got all this great stuff happening,
That's
and
awesome.
I noticed that. Well, first of all, I get super nervous before a concert, and it's happened my whole life. And
Really?
I thought it would get a lot easier as I got older,
Yeah.
but it seems to be getting even a little worse. I almost I almost need therapy before I walk out on the stage,
Yeah.
and I need to be by myself.
Yeah.
So I always go to side stage, and I look out at the audience as they're getting seated, and then now I've started running through some warm up exercises that I never used to do,
Mhm.
and I'm figuring because as you get a bit older, you got to start maybe paying a little more attention to the warm up aspect of the. You just don't go out and start singing "Turn Me Loose" to the top of your lungs right off the bat.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's kind of interesting, and I learned a lot of exercises that really work for me.
Mhm.
And you know, it's important to warm up the voice, and it's also important to cool off the voice to
Yes, it
take it
is.
back down. And if you can do that and stay away from air conditioners, you know,
Yeah.
you can actually do pretty well. For me, anyways.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the air conditioners, that's just because for listeners out there who may not understand the relationship there, it's because the air conditioners take all the moisture out of the air, so it's so drying for your vocal folds. It's it makes it really hard because you don't end up having enough moisture, enough secretions in your vocal folds to make it very comfortable to use your voice.
Right.
So you either need to stay away from air conditioning or be using like a nebulizer or something to reintroduce the hydration into your system. Yeah.
I remember waking up on the tour bus a few years ago. We travel in a tour bus.
Yeah.
And you get in the bunk and you get to sleep, and somebody invariably would get up and turn the temperature down to I had a comfortable 74 would be
Mm-hmm.
the maximum low for me.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody would turn it down to like 69, and I'd wake up and I'd go, "Oh my God, what's going on with my throat?" And boy, after you have a few tough shows and then talk with the rest of the band, nobody touches that temperature gauge
Yeah.
anymore
No
because it's
kidding.
important, because it's really I'm singing every song.
Yeah.
You got to be ready, and you can't sleep overnight in a tour bus and have somebody mess around with the temperature.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh yeah, you know what? After the show, I will send you some information about a nebulizer because it's actually a really important tool if you are traveling and in and out of air conditioning and stuff to reintroduce hydration. You breathe in isotonic saline solution, and it gets the particles are so small it gets the hydration right onto the surface of your vocal folds, and it's
Nice.
a great tool to have in your toolkit. So
Another thing I forgot to mention to you is we started the tour most of these tours down in Florida.
yeah.
It was 104 degrees by the time we hit the
Oh,
stage, and I walked out there, and at least down there it was humid. But
yeah.
then you get up into Texas and it's dry as a bone.
Yeah.
And then all these other places like Arizona, and it's just, and New Mexico,
Yeah.
and it's just dry. I mean, talking about, and sometimes you have the sun shining on you on top of the high temperatures.
Yeah.
And I notice people in the audience are dropping and they're just sitting there watching. And
Yeah.
we're doing these concerts, we're supposed to be moving around and singing all the songs and put hands in the air, and the lights are coming, the sun's hitting you. And after a while, you got to be careful. You got to be rehydrated, like almost professionally by some medic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A couple of our roadies went down. They had to go to the hospital because they got dehydrated just
Yep.
from the heat. So
Yep.
you got to be careful out there. For all the singers that are coming up in the world, you have to really start
Absolutely.
taking care, especially if you're a singer, because you got to
Yeah.
take care of the vocal cords, and you
Yeah.
really have to pay attention to it.
That's the truth. So looking back over your career in that same kind of vein, is there anything that you would definitely do the same if you were going back and doing it all over again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um,
Yeah.
do you know what's kind of funny? I found it a little uncomfortable, the songwriting aspect right off the bat. It was a little difficult.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand it. And so I got forced into a position, and I don't even know if the people in the band realize this, but I was in a band that was really one of the top-notch bands in Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably in the mid 70s. And I got asked to go to Toronto and join another band. They were about to record their third album.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, they kind of welcomed me and everything was great. And then we went to the rehearsal hall where they rehearse, and they said, "Well, let's write some songs." And I just kind of went, ah. But the experience pushed me to a place that I'd never been before.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was
Yep.
saying earlier, being pushed into situations, you'd be surprised what you can come up with. And
Yeah.
so I ended up writing or co-writing every song on this album. And
Yeah.
it turned out I ran with these guys for 3 years, and that's really where I started songwriting, because the band I was with in Calgary, we weren't really writing songs. We had maybe two songs, and they were kind of okay type songs. But when I went
Mm-hmm.
to Toronto, because I went in the studio, Nimbus 9, which was the top studio where Alice Cooper and Bob Seger recorded. With I was with working with Garth's father, Rich, Mr. Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Richardson, and
Mm-hmm.
rest in peace, Jack. I know he's up there. I'll be up there soon. and and it was fun to
No
go to the
hurry.
studio and cut this record, but there was another learning experience altogether. And the thing is, I probably wouldn't change anything, except I would cut a vocal track, and then I'd say, I just want to do that last bit one more time, and the guys go, and Jack would go, "We don't have time. We got a budget.
Mm-hmm.
We got to stick to it." And they never let me fix anything. And
Ah.
this is before any kind of auto tuning or anything. And if you
Mm-hmm.
had to fix something, you had to do some tape splicing and all this nonsense, which
Yeah.
we never did. I just learned to, that's kind of where I learned to sing on pitch, because if you
Yeah.
didn't sing on pitch, that's what was going on the record. And so,
Mother
that's
of
another,
necessity.
yeah. And so once again, it's like I was forced into a situation and you learn from it. So if you ask me if I would change anything, I don't know. I learned so much from being forced into situations that were uncomfortable for me. And that's kind of become
Yeah.
a part of my life, uncomfortable situations. And because every night we've been playing in front of 18, 20,000 people on these tours. And I've been doing it for a long time. And I still look out there and go, there's no way I can do this. There's no way I can do this. And I take a few breaths and then I go do it, and
Yeah.
people go, how do you do that? And I go, I really don't know, because I'm sitting in the side corner on top of a piece of a road case, just doing a little bit of breathing and psyching myself up. And I don't look that confident. And all of a sudden, the lights come up and I walk out there and I take control and I do what I have to do. And that's something, I don't know where that comes from. I really don't.
Yeah.
It's like the magic.
Yeah. So that's really interesting with the stage nerves, the anxiety there. Once you are out there and in it, do you find that it passes and then you're in it and you're good, or does it stay with you the whole time you're on stage?
I think it's that Tom Petty thing.
Mm.
The waiting is the hardest part.
Yeah.
When I wait 20 minutes side stage warming up my voice, it's like, it seems like 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's 20 minutes, but it seems like 4 hours. And as soon as the lights come on and I hit the stage, I'm a totally different guy, and I'm totally comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are in an industry that sees widely different levels of education that supplement natural talent. Some very formal, some very informal, or mentorship or self-taught sort of models. What was your musical education like, and how has it impacted your work, one way or the other?
It's funny, Sarah. When I was in high school, I I was in bands all the time, so high school was just something you had to do. I wasn't really all
Yeah.
that into it. And then they asked me, "You got to take biology." I says, "Biology, really, or what?" And they went, or you could take choir or band or something. And I went, I'll take choir because
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed the singing aspect of it. And I learned quite a bit in choir, and it was
Mm-hmm.
fun. And I really liked it. It's a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and where I am right now, we do have airplanes flying over, and I hope that's not going to get too much in the sound. But I am
It's
I'm comfortable with it because all I do is travel. But
yeah.
so,
There's
anyways,
not much we can do about airplane sound.
you know, you know what I said, Sarah? I said I would rather sing in a choir with a bunch of happy people than dissect a frog. You know what I'm saying? So
Fair enough.
it wasn't big for me. And then we even put on stuff for Christmas, Christmas pageants.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is pretty funny. So me and my buddies were all in the choir, and we all listened to this part, and we had it down pretty good. We three kings of Orient are, all in 4-part harmony.
Yeah.
And we're all dressed like the old, whatever, wise men.
Kings. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're doing this thing, and this is in Penticton High School.
Yeah.
And as soon as we started singing, because we were kind of 4 guys, everybody knew who we were. We were kind of the Rathscallions of Penticton. And all of a sudden, we're feeling these things hit us in the face. All these people had pea shooters, and they were just going the whole time we were up there singing all of this beautiful songs in the Christmas pageant. They were nailing us with peas.
Oh no.
I'll never forget it.
Not quite rotten tomatoes, but pea shooters.
And I don't think it was because we were singing badly. I hope. I think it was just because, that's what kids do.
Exactly. Can you talk about, and to be clear here, I'm not necessarily asking you to name names, although you can answer this however you want to answer it. But can you talk about what the most important relationships have been in your career, personal, professional, that have helped you on the journey to where you are now?
Absolutely. I've always had good relationships with the bands I'm in.
Yeah.
And generally, it's usually the guitar player. Paul and I are very tight. Paul and I are, we decide on everything. We always talk. We always have. And that's a 45, 46-year relationship.
Yeah.
And we write songs together. He'll start something. I'll start something. We'll finish it together. We'll produce it. We'll sing it. We'll make it happen. And Paul Dean has been a big part of my life for sure. All the guys in the band have, and we're all very good friends still, which is really, it's really quite odd. After 46 years, we're all still friends and stuff. But we
that's
really
saying
are.
something.
Yeah, we really are. And I see Doug, our keyboardist. I see him quite often. We live in the same neighborhood. We do things together. Matter of fact, he was such a nice guy. When I just recently had I had a surgery to fix my left ankle, because over the years I've broken it 3 times and it just got messed up. So I finally got it fixed, and I had to stay with my foot above my heart for like a month. Yeah. And so if Kathy was to go out, she would take care of it. Doug would come over and he'd bring something to eat. He'd say, "Let's watch a movie and I'll hang out with you for 3 hours." He's one of those kind of guys. And after all these years, it's still nice to know that we have relationships like that.
Yeah.
They seem to be getting better.
Yeah. It's important. So you talked a little bit earlier about getting started with songwriting, and that was born of necessity. Can you talk a little bit about your songwriting process and what that looks like?
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of people say, "Do you write the lyrics first, or do you come up with the music first?" A lot of the times, and I can speak for Paul, because what we do is we come up with some kind of a groove, like a guitar line, and then it just basically builds from there. And usually the lyrics are the last, the last thing we do. A lot of people say, like some of the other bands, they write lyrics first and then try to fit them into songs. We've never really been that way. We do it the other way around. I remember when Paul and I first got together, I'd moved from Toronto to Calgary, and I met Paul. And he was in this warehouse in the middle of winter in Calgary, which can be very cold. I'm talking 30, 40 below, folks.
Yeah.
And this warehouse used to be where they fixed old buses. So it was a big warehouse, and it had a big heater at the ceiling blowing warm air down. The place was completely empty. It had newspaper on the windows. And I opened this little half door, and Paul was sitting in there writing, playing like a rhythm on a guitar with a little ghetto blaster. And he was recording this little part. And he felt somebody looking at him because he couldn't see me. His back to the wall. And he looked over, and he just says, "Come on in." Well, ever since that day, we've been together, by the way. And that goes back to 1978.
Yeah.
And the first month we were together, I kept playing on the bass guitar. I'd go boom, 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 boom. And I just kept playing it over and over again. And I would say, "Let's record this. And he'd go, "What for?" I go, "Because I'm going to play the drums. I'm going to show you how I hear this song."
Yeah.
And so I played it so many times. He says, "If you play that one more time, I'm going to smash this guitar over your head." And I go, "Well, why did you write some guitar parts around the song?" And that turned out to be "Turn Me Loose," which was a very big song for us. And that's how that song got started. But, Paul writes a lot of songs and then comes over and wants me to help him finish them, or I'll go over to his place, we'll finish them. And a lot of times he has a basic kind of feel for it, and I will change the melodies, and then I'll come up with some words and stuff. One of the things is when I was recording another one of our big songs, it was written differently than it turned out to be. And when I was recording it, I just was basically totally into it. And I've got my eyes closed and I'm singing. And I went, "Everybody's working for the weekend." And they kind of stopped the tape and they went, "Hold it, it's supposed to be everybody's waiting for the weekend." And I went, no way. It's got to be working for the weekend. And, that's how it changed. And that changed right on the spot. It was like, I never planned it that way. And that was very exciting because Paul came out and he went, "That is so much better, Mike." Yeah. And a lot of times we'll work like that. He'll have almost a whole song together and I'll come in and just say, "I think it's got to be this." Right? And he said, "Let's try it." So, we're always open to trying different things. But Paul's one of these guys. He's like a builder. He's like a carpenter. He molds things together and he takes pieces from this and puts them in here. And I imagine a lot of people, like your brother's a big songwriter. I bet he does a lot of that.
Yeah.
You take a part of a song and add it to another part of a song. Yeah. And then Paul will come over to my place and play the song. And I go, "Hey, that's from that other song." He goes, "Yeah, I know, but nobody will know that." And, and so we've been working like that for years. And it seems to pay off. I mean, we've done very well. I mean, I can't complain.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. Songwriting is the hardest part as far as I'm concerned. But the whole thing, touring's got its thing. It's hard. You have to be, into it. You have to be able to go away and work a lot and travel.
Yes.
But the songwriting to me was a bit like pulling teeth. It's like, oh God. But once you get it, you feel so good. It's just, you get this feeling that rushes through you. It's kind of like getting a touchdown in the NFL.
Yeah. And so you talked about that often the lyrics are the last piece to come.
Yeah.
How do you approach the sort of concept of storytelling within your writing or within your performing and connecting to your audience?
Oh yeah, I had a nice. It's an interesting question because just recently, or last tour, we were on tour with the Foreigner, and the singer for Foreigner, Kelly. He came into the dressing room to hang out quite a bit, and he comes in the dressing room one night and he goes, "Mike, I've been watching you for the first 2 weeks of this tour." And he goes, "You really connect with the audience." He says, "You come out there," and he says, "You're just kind of like one of them. You don't come out all fancy. You don't come out with all these fancy clothes. You just come out there and connect with the audience right away." And I never really noticed I did it, but he noticed I did it and told me about it. So I kind of went, "Oh, that's interesting," because I kind of feel myself as kind of a regular guy. And I look at the audience and I kind of look just like them. I mean, I'm not any different than them. I'm just happen to be a singer in a band. They happen to like my songs. And I think when I'm on stage, I treat it like that. I just tell stories that are real. And I tell them stuff that I tell them a lot of times about writing songs. One of the songs that was very kind of storytelling was the song called When It's Over by us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically about a relationship that went bad, or not bad, but ended. Sometimes
Yep.
things end. So,
Yep.
and you didn't, and the whole essence of the song was, I don't want to be enemies. We're just not going to go out anymore. But I
Yeah.
want you to be with me when it's over. Like, let's still be friends. We live on this earth together, kind of thing.
Yep.
So, we tell stories. Working for the Weekend was another story. Um, Paul was living in Kitsilano in Vancouver, a beach part of town. And he was on his balcony, and it was on Friday, and the guy's coming home from work. He's got his dry cleaning over one shoulder and a case of beer in the other hand, walking back to his house or his apartment. And he was just basically getting ready for the weekend, right? And he's going to go out dancing. He's got a case of beer to get rolling, and that was it. And that's how Working for the Weekend started. I mean, I could tell you stories about almost every song.
Yeah.
That's just how it was. And the stuff that happened to us and experiences that we've experienced along the way, they all come into play. And it's just actually kind of like it's just a little piece of life. Our whole
Yeah.
concert's a little piece. And a lot of people, and I found this out very early in our touring career, when we played, people would say, when you said "turn me loose," I had enough balls to tell my boss to shove it, and I said, "This is the worst job I've ever done, and I'm out of here." And they said They said the reason we did it is because "Turn Me Loose," the lyrics in "Turn Me Loose." So, and even though "Turn Me Loose" was written about something completely different from my point of view,
Yeah.
it's when you write a song that everybody can take their own way, that's usually going to be a pretty big song.
I think that is one of the most interesting pieces of songwriting and lyricism is that even when it's a fairly cut and dry narrative, this can be true, but often lyrics are cloaked in metaphor. And so as a listener, we create our own story for any song that we listen to. And it allows everybody to have their own relationship to that song because we picture ourselves in the song, in the
Right.
story of the song.
Right. In
Yeah.
your own story, and that's the
Yeah,
listener.
yeah.
And you know what else I found out? And this is kind of like a little bit of a psychology, really. We're playing away, and I said I made a mistake. I sang the wrong words, and they didn't even hear the wrong word because they're singing the song in their head, and they're singing the right word, and it means to them. And they didn't. They just goes by that people don't even know because once you start the song and start singing it, it becomes the original piece. No matter how you play it. And once in a while, you flub a lyric because whatever, you get sidetracked.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and then there's always the ones that come to the front and they sing the words that I go, I'm just gonna watch what you're singing and I'll sing along with it. Because it's just having one of those.
Yeah, when you can lip read your fans to help you get through the lyrics, it's always handy.
Yeah, I haven't got to the point where I'm using a teleprompter yet. So
So you've had some huge hits in enormous movies. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the opportunities for those placements came to be?
absolutely. The first time I remember Bruce Allen, our manager at the time,
Mm-hmm.
he came out to see us on the road and he actually had this song. And he says, I want you to listen to the song. And then I want you to pick a female artist to sing it with. He says,
Mm-hmm.
we just got offered to do this movie. And it's going to be probably going to be a big movie. He says, you got
Yeah.
to do this. And I said, oh, okay. So I got the song. But I didn't even have to think about who I was going to choose. Because a lot of people may not know this, but Hart used to live in Vancouver. And when I was a
Yeah.
kid, I used to drive down from Penticton, which is a 4-hour drive, just to see Hart at the Blue Horizon in New Westminster at the Zodiac Club. And it was a big deal because they were all just starting to get into songwriting, but they did a lot of Led Zeppelin. And
Yeah.
they did it very well. And anyways, I've always loved Anne's voice. So I just said to Bruce, I
Oh,
said, well, first off, I said, before we even listen to it, I'd like to do it with Ann Wilson. And then I heard the song and I went, this really simple song. I said, yeah, let's do this. And so that's
yeah.
really how that one started. But it led to a few other things, that I could tell you about as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, please.
Well, I got a call uh, once again through Bruce Allen. He says um, these producers in California want to talk to you. I said okay, and it was like the big producers who do all the big movies, right? The
Mm-hmm.
top guys.
Yeah.
The guys who did all the CSI TV shows and stuff, and they did.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did. Well, the first song I was talking about was "Almost Paradise," by the way, just before
Yeah.
this with Ann Wilson, and that was for the movie Footloose.
Right.
And I thought it was kind of interesting because in the movie Footloose, the head guy was a preacher. He was the head of the family, and because there was an accident at a dance, he'd forbidden dance and listening to music in this little town, and there's all these kids were rebelling it, and and
Yeah.
then Almost Paradise became the ballad they sang at the first dance they were allowed to sing. That was a pretty good movie. So I guess because I did that and it did so well, these famous producers wanted to talk to me. So I flew down to Los Angeles from Vancouver, and I walked into Paramount Studios after getting past the gate and everything, and I went into this big office, and I'm looking at these two guys walk back and forth in the whole office, and they got a popcorn machine making fresh popcorn, and they're talking to each other, but they don't even notice I'm standing there. Finally, they both stop. It's kind of like a movie in itself. Finally, they both
Yeah.
stop and they turn around and they go, "Can we help you?" And I says, "Well, I'm Mike Reno from Loverboy. You guys wanted to talk to me." And they go, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Come over here." So they took me over to the corner and they put a VHS in,
Yeah.
and they were shooting this movie, this little movie that hadn't been out yet. And the scene was Tom Cruise doing the scene where he takes his motorcycle up the hill and he's chased by his girlfriend, and the whole thing. He says, "Can you write a movie for this part?" When they finally get to, I said, "Sure." And I said, "Sure, I can." I said, "When do you need it by?" And he says, "Thursday." And I said, you guys know it's Monday, right?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "I got to fly back to Vancouver." So I phoned Paul and I said, that song we were working on? Go in the studio and start finishing it off, and I'll be home tonight, and I'll come
Yeah.
right from the airport, and I'll sing it. We'll do whatever we need to do, and then we'll mix it, and we'll send it down. We gave it to him by Thursday, and this is back before you could send stuff, on the internet or anything.
Right.
You had to actually mail it,
Yep.
and so that was a real close one. We almost didn't make the cutoff for that one, and that movie was Top Gun, another big
Right.
movie, and these are big moments in my life, and they all just seem to happen. Once again, pushed into an uncomfortable zone,
Mm-hmm.
like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
and you either do it or you don't. And one thing was with me is I always try to do it.
Yeah.
At least I try to do it. You know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Opportunity knocks. You gotta.
You got to step up.
Yeah, you do.
Thanks for joining us today. So that was actually just part one of our interview. And I would love it if you come back on Thursday to check out the second part of our interview. There's so much more juicy goodness. I can't wait for you to check it out.